The whistle of the approaching locomotive pierced through the silence of Cottonwood Springs' small train station, but Violet Kane hardly noticed. She sat motionless on the weather-worn bench, her black morning dress stark against the faded wood, a small leather valise at her feet. September 1881 marked 6 months since she'd buried her husband, and the passing of time had done little to ease the hollowness inside her. The train's brakes squealed as it slowed, billowing steam across the platform. Violet didn't move. She wasn't waiting for anyone. She wasn't even certain why she'd come to the station today, except that the walls of her small house on the edge of town had begun to close in on her, suffocating what little spirit she had left. Passengers began to disembark, men in dusty suits, women holding children's hands, a few soldiers in uniform. Violet watched them without really seeing, her eyes unfocused as she twisted the simple gold band on her finger. Then, from the last car, a tall figure stepped down. He moved with the easy grace of a man comfortable in his own skin, despite the visible fatigue in his bearing. His dark hat was pulled low, and his clothes bore the unmistakable signs of hard travel. A worn leather saddlebag was slung over one shoulder, and a revolver hung at his hip. The stranger paused, scanning the platform, his eyes eventually settling on Violet. For a moment, their gazes locked. She couldn't have explained why, but something in the way he looked at her, curious perhaps, or concerned, made her sit up straighter. He approached with measured steps, stopping a respectful distance from her bench. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his voice a low rumble that somehow cut through the station noise. "Would you happen to know if there's a decent place to stay in town?" Violet hadn't spoken more than necessary to anyone in months, yet she found herself answering, "The Riverside Inn is clean, 3 blocks north." Her voice sounded foreign to her own ears, rusty from disuse. He nodded his thanks but didn't move away. Instead, he gestured to the empty space beside her. "Mind if I rest a moment? Been standing on that train for near 12 hours. She hesitated, then shifted slightly to make room. As he sat, she caught the scent of leather, horse, and something unidentifiable that spoke of wide open spaces. "Name's Gabriel Alderman," he said, extending a hand. Violet stared at it for a moment before briefly touching her gloved fingers to his. "Violet Kane," she replied, the words feeling strange on her tongue. It had been so long since she'd introduced herself to anyone. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Kane." His eyes, she noticed now, were a clear, steady gray blue like the sky after a storm. "You waiting for someone?" The question was innocent enough, but it cut through her. "No," she said simply. "Not anymore." Understanding crossed his face as he noted her black dress. "I'm sorry for your loss, madam. Thank you." The customary response came automatically. She'd heard those words so many times they'd lost all meaning. Gabriel Alderman didn't press further, and for that, Violet was grateful. They sat in silence for several minutes, watching as the platform gradually emptied of passengers and the station master began preparing for the train's departure. "You from around here?" he finally asked. "Yes. My husband and I moved to Cottonwood Springs 5 years ago." He opened the Mercantile on Main Street. It was the most she'd spoken to anyone in weeks. "The one with the blue door? I noticed it when the stage passed through town on my way to catch this train last month." She nodded, surprised he'd remembered such a detail. "It needs repainting." "Good store, though. Bought some tobacco there." The train whistle blew again, signaling imminent departure. Gabriel stood, adjusting his hat. "Well, Mrs. Kane, I appreciate the recommendation. Maybe I'll see you around town." "Perhaps," she replied, not believing it for a moment. People said such things out of politeness. He tipped his hat and strode away, his long legs carrying him swiftly down the platform and into the dusty street beyond. Violet remained seated, wondering why the brief interaction had left her feeling more awake than she had in months. The following afternoon, Violet was arranging merchandise on the shelves of the Mercantile when the bell above the door jingled. She turned, prepared to offer the polite but distant greeting she'd perfected since taking over Thomas's store, only to find Gabriel Alderman ducking his head to enter. "Mrs. Kane," he said, seeming as surprised as she was. "I didn't realize this was your establishment." "It was my husband's," she corrected automatically. "I've been managing it since he passed." Gabriel removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "You run this place by yourself?" "I have a boy who helps with deliveries and heavy lifting. Otherwise, yes." She moved behind the counter, assuming the role of shopkeeper. "What can I help you with, Mr. Alderman?" He glanced around the well-stocked store. "Just need some supplies." "Planning to stay in the area for a while." "Oh." Despite herself, Violet was curious. "Are you looking for work?" A smile crossed his face, transforming his weather-worn features into something unexpectedly handsome. "In a manner of speaking." "I've been hired by the Cattlemen's Association to help with some rustling problems out at the Circle T Ranch." "You're a lawman?" She couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. "Former Texas Ranger," he said without pride or embellishment. "Now I take jobs as they come." Violet nodded, unsure how to respond. Cottonwood Springs had its share of troubles what frontier town didn't, but the cattle rustling had been growing worse over the past year. "I'm sorry about your husband," Gabriel said after a moment, his tone gentler. "Was it sudden?" The question caught her off guard. Most people in town had stopped mentioning Thomas months ago, uncomfortable with her grief. "Pneumonia," she answered simply. "It took him in 3 weeks." Gabriel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "My wife died of fever 4 years back, down in El Paso." He said it matter-of-factly, but Violet saw the shadow that passed over his face. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. "Life out here doesn't make many promises," he replied, "except that it'll be hard." Their eyes met across the counter, and Violet felt a strange connection, the recognition of a shared experience that few could truly understand. The moment was broken when another customer entered. Gabriel stepped aside, selecting a few necessities as Violet attended to the elderly Mrs. Thornton's request for sewing notions. When she finished, Gabriel approached the counter with his purchases: ammunition, coffee, tobacco, and a small bag of peppermint candies. Violet raised an eyebrow at the last item. "Sweet tooth," he explained with a half-smile. "One vice I never outgrew." As she tallied his purchases, Violet found herself speaking without planning to. "The Circle T is having a harvest dance this Saturday. Most of the town will be there." She paused, feeling foolish. "If you're looking to meet the people you'll be working with," Gabriel considered her words as he counted out coins. "Will you be attending, Mrs. Kane?" Violet hesitated. She hadn't been to any social gatherings since Thomas's death. "I hadn't planned to." He nodded, accepting this without comment. Taking his wrapped parcels, he settled his hat back on his head. "Thank you for the information all the same. Good day, Mrs. Kane." After he left, Violet stood motionless behind the counter, wondering why she'd mentioned the dance at all. The mercantile closed at 5 o'clock. Violet locked up and began the walk home, her mind still occupied with the strange encounter. The sun was beginning to set, painting the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. As she turned onto her street, she noticed a figure sitting on her front porch steps. Her steps faltered when she recognized Gabriel Alderman. He stood as she approached, looking somewhat uncomfortable. "Mr. Alderman," she said cautiously, "is something wrong?" "No, madam." "I apologize for the intrusion." He gestured to her front door. "The lock on your door is broken. I noticed it when I was passing by." Violet frowned. "What do you mean? Someone's tampered with it. Recently, by the look of it." His expression was serious. "May I?" Still confused, Violet nodded. Gabriel approached the door, pointing out where the wood around the lock had been splintered. "See here. Someone tried to force it, didn't get in but damaged the mechanism." Alarm swept through her. "I don't understand. There's nothing valuable in there." Maybe they didn't know that. Gabriel straightened, his hand unconsciously moving to rest near his holster. "Do you have somewhere you could stay tonight? A friend or relative?" Violet shook her head. "No, she stopped, pride making her stiffen her spine. "I'll be fine, Mr. Alderman. Thank you for your concern." He studied her face, clearly unconvinced. "Mrs. Kane, I don't mean to frighten you, but whoever did this might come back, and next time they might succeed." Fear fluttered in her chest, but she refused to show it. "What do you suggest, then?" Gabriel considered for a moment. "Let me check inside first, make sure no one's already in there. Then I'll fix that lock well enough to get you through tonight. Tomorrow we can have a proper carpenter look at it." Violet wanted to refuse, to insist she could manage on her own as she had for months. But practicality won out over pride. "Very well." Gabriel entered first, hand on his gun. Violet followed, her heart racing as he methodically checked each room of the small house. Finding no one, he returned to the front door and examined the damaged lock more carefully. "Got any tools?" he asked. Violet retrieved a small toolbox from the kitchen, watching as Gabriel worked to secure the door. His hands were large but surprisingly dexterous, handling the delicate mechanisms with care. "Should hold for now," he said finally, testing the lock, "but you'll want something sturdier." "Thank you," Violet said, suddenly aware that she had a man in her home for the first time since Thomas died. The realization made her uncomfortable. "I appreciate your help, Mr. Alderman." He seemed to sense her discomfort. "I'll be on my way then, but I don't like leaving you here alone." "I've been alone for 6 months, Mr. Alderman. I'm quite accustomed to it." Something in his expression softened. "Being accustomed to something doesn't make it right, Mrs. Kane." He reached for his hat. "I'll check back tomorrow if that's all right. Make sure everything's secure." Violet walked him to the door. As he stepped onto the porch, he turned back. "About that harvest dance, maybe it would be good for both of us to attend." Before she could respond, he was gone, his tall figure disappearing into the gathering dusk. That night, every creak of the house made Violet start. She sat in her bedroom with Thomas's old shotgun across her lap, wondering who would want to break into her home and why. When dawn finally came, she was exhausted but relieved. At the store, she found it difficult to concentrate. Shortly before noon, the bell jangled and Sheriff Mills entered, followed by Gabriel. "Mrs. Kane," the sheriff said, removing his hat. "Mr. Alderman here says someone tried to break into your house yesterday." "Yes, that's right." She glanced at Gabriel, who stood silently by the door. Sheriff Mills, a competent but overworked man in his 50s, frowned. "Any idea who might have done it?" "None at all." "Could be random," Mills said, though he didn't sound convinced. "But with those rustlers getting bolder." "You heard about what happened at the Peterson place?" Violet shook her head. "Broke in 2 nights ago. Took valuables, threatened Mrs. Peterson." The sheriff's expression darkened. "Been happening too often lately. Seems like whoever's behind the rustling is branching out." Gabriel spoke up. "That's why I suggested Mrs. Kane not stay alone until we sort this out." The sheriff nodded. "He's right, Mrs. Kane. You got family you can stay with." "No," Violet said firmly. "And I can't abandon the store. My livelihood depends on it." Mills looked uncomfortable. "Maybe one of the ladies from church could stay with you." Before Violet could respond, Gabriel stepped forward. "I'll keep an eye on the place. I'm staying at the Riverside, just down the street. I can check in regularly." The sheriff seemed relieved by the offer. "That would be a load off my mind. Mr. Alderman here comes highly recommended by the Rangers." After the sheriff left, Violet confronted Gabriel. "You don't need to appoint yourself my protector, Mr. Alderman. I'm perfectly capable of defending yourself, I'm sure," he interrupted gently. "But even the most capable person needs sleep, Mrs. Kane, and it's hard to sleep with one eye open." She wanted to argue but couldn't deny the logic of his words. "Fine, but I don't want to be a burden on your time." "It's no burden, consider it neighborly." He glanced around the store. "Any chance I could get a cup of coffee?" Been riding the boundary line since dawn. Despite herself, Violet felt a smile tugging at her lips. In the back room, it might be strong. "The stronger the better," he said, following her through the curtained doorway to the small office where she kept a pot on the stove. As she poured him a cup, Violet found herself studying him more carefully. In the daylight, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, speaking of years under the harsh sun. His hands, wrapped around the hot cup, bore the calluses of a man familiar with both guns and hard work. "How long were you with the Rangers?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. 10 years, he answered. "Joined up when I was 22, and your wife, was she from Texas too?" A shadow passed over his face. "Arizona. Met her when I was tracking some bank robbers through Tucson. She was teaching school there." His eyes grew distant. "Smartest woman I ever knew. Could recite Shakespeare without opening a book." Violet felt a pang of sympathy. "You must miss her very much. Every day," he met her gaze. "Just like you miss your husband, I expect." The simple acknowledgement of her ongoing grief touched something in Violet. Most people seemed to expect her to be over it by now, as if 6 months was sufficient time to mourn the loss of the man she'd planned to spend her life with. "Yes," she said softly. "I do." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, two people who understood what it meant to lose the future they'd counted on. "About that dance," Gabriel said finally. "I think we should go." Violet started to shake her head, but he continued. "Not together necessarily. But if someone is targeting you for some reason, being in public with witnesses might be safer than sitting alone at home." She hadn't considered that angle. "You think I'm in real danger then?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I don't like coincidences. And it seems like a strange coincidence that someone would try to break into your home right when these rustlers are getting more aggressive." Violet considered his words. Thomas kept the store's ledgers and accounts at home. All the information about suppliers, creditors, customers who owed money. Gabriel's expression sharpened, including the ranchers who have been hit by rustlers. "Yes, I suppose so. Thomas handled the business side. I've been learning as I go." "Those records might be valuable to someone looking to target specific ranches." Gabriel set down his cup. "Where do you keep them?" Violet led him to the small desk in the corner of her parlor where stacks of leather-bound ledgers were neatly arranged. "Here, 5 years of business records." Gabriel examined them without touching. This could be what they are after, information about which ranchers have the most valuable stock, which ones might be vulnerable. But why not just break into the store? The current ledger is there. Too public, maybe. Or they didn't know which ledger they needed, he straightened. "Either way, I don't think you should stay here alone until we figure this out." Violet bristled at the suggestion. "I told you I have nowhere else to go, and I won't be driven from my own home." Gabriel ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. "Then let me stay. I can sleep on the sofa, keep watch." "That would be completely inappropriate," she protested, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "What would people say?" "They'd say you're being practical about your safety," he countered, then sighed at her expression. "But I understand your concern. What about this? I'll stay at the riverside but check on you several times throughout the night. And tomorrow, we'll move these ledgers somewhere more secure." It was a reasonable compromise. "All right," Violet agreed reluctantly. "And I'll think about the dance." Gabriel nodded, seemingly satisfied. "I'd better get back to the Circle T. Sheriff wants me to talk to Old Man Thornton about what he saw the night his cattle were stolen." As he prepared to leave, Violet found herself strangely reluctant to see him go. "Be careful," she said. "These rustlers sound dangerous." A smile touched his lips. "I always am, Mrs. Kane." He settled his hat on his head and departed, leaving Violet to wonder how her solitary existence had been so quickly disrupted by the arrival of Gabriel Alderman. That night, true to his word, Gabriel checked on her home 3 times. Each time, Violet heard his soft knock and went to the window to signal that she was safe. Each time, seeing his silhouette in the moonlight brought an unexpected sense of security. By Saturday, no further attempts had been made to enter Violet's home, but Gabriel remained vigilant. He'd arranged for the ledgers to be stored in the bank's vault and had personally reinforced her doors and windows. "Have you decided about the dance?" he asked when he stopped by the store that afternoon. Violet hesitated. The thought of attending a social function still filled her with dread, but staying alone in her house seemed equally unappealing. "I'll go," she said finally, "but I won't stay long." Something like pleasure crossed Gabriel's face. I'll escort you there and back, safest that way. That's not necessary, she began, but he cut her off. Please, Mrs. Kane, it would ease my mind. The sincerity in his voice silenced her objections. Very well, but people will talk. Let them, he said simply. I'll call for you at 7. As she closed the store that evening, Violet felt a nervousness that had nothing to do with potential danger. It had been so long since she dressed for any occasion other than church or work. In her bedroom, she opened her wardrobe and stared at the row of somber black dresses. At the back, partially hidden, hung a dress she hadn't worn since before Thomas fell ill. Dark blue silk, simply cut but elegant. Thomas had always said it matched her eyes. With trembling fingers, Violet reached for it. Removing her morning attire felt like a betrayal, but as she slipped the blue silk over her head, something inside her eased. The fabric settled around her, a whisper of her former life. She brushed her hair until it shone, securing it in a simple knot at the nape of her neck. A touch of rose water, a pair of small pearl earrings Thomas had given her on their first anniversary. Looking in the mirror, Violet hardly recognized herself. At precisely 7, a knock sounded at her door. Taking a deep breath, she opened it to find Gabriel standing on her porch, dressed in a clean black suit with a white shirt and string tie. He'd trimmed his beard and combed his hair, and for a moment, they simply stared at each other. "You look beautiful," he said finally, the words rough with sincerity. Violet felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Alderman." He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. Together, they walked toward the Circle T Ranch, where lanterns already glowed in the gathering dusk, and the sound of fiddle music drifted on the evening breeze. The ranch's large barn had been cleared of hay and livestock, its floor swept clean for dancing. Tables laden with food lined one wall, and a small band played lively tunes at the far end. Nearly everyone in Cottonwood Springs seemed to be there, along with ranch hands and families from the surrounding properties. As they entered, conversation faltered. Violet felt the weight of curious stares and whispered comments. She hadn't been to a social gathering in months, and now here she was in a colored dress on the arm of a handsome stranger. Gabriel must have sensed her discomfort. He leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Hold your head high, Mrs. Kane. You've done nothing wrong by coming here tonight." His words gave her courage. Straightening her shoulders, Violet allowed him to lead her into the barn. Sheriff Mills approached them immediately, relief evident on his face. "Mrs. Kane, good to see you out and about. And Alderman, any progress on our rustler problem?" As the men discussed business, Violet found herself surrounded by several of the town's women, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. "Violet, dear, it's so good to see you," said Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife. "We've been worried about you keeping to yourself so much." "I've been managing the store," Violet replied. "It keeps me busy." "And I see you've met our new law enforcer," added Mrs. Peterson, her gaze sliding to Gabriel. "Mr. Alderman has been kind enough to assist with some security concerns at my home," Violet said firmly, unwilling to let gossip take root. Before Mrs. Peterson could respond, the band struck up a lively reel. Gabriel appeared at Violet's side. "Would you care to dance, Mrs. Kane?" Every instinct told her to refuse. Dancing felt too much like joy, and joy felt like betrayal. But looking into Gabriel's eyes, seeing the understanding there, Violet found herself nodding. He led her onto the floor with confidence, his hand warm at her waist. "I should warn you," she said quietly, "I haven't danced in a very long time." "Neither have I," he admitted. "We'll remember together." And somehow they did. After a moment of awkwardness, muscle memory took over, and Violet found herself moving in perfect harmony with Gabriel. He was a surprisingly graceful dancer, leading her through the steps with a gentle firmness that made it easy to follow. As they turned and stepped in time to the music, Violet felt something inside her uncoiling, a tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. For a few precious minutes, she wasn't the widow Kane, object of pity and whispers. She was simply a woman dancing with a man who looked at her as if she were the only person in the room. When the music ended, they were both slightly breathless. Gabriel's eyes were bright, his hand lingering at her waist. "Thank you," he said softly. Before Violet could respond, a commotion at the barn entrance drew everyone's attention. A ranch hand burst in, his face pale with urgency. "Fire at the south pasture. Someone's rustling the cattle under cover of the smoke." The festive atmosphere dissolved instantly. Men rushed for their guns and horses, women gathered children. Sheriff Mills bellowed orders, trying to organize a response. Gabriel's expression hardened. "Stay here," he told Violet. "It's safer with people around. Be careful," she urged, suddenly afraid. "These men are desperate." He squeezed her hand briefly, then joined the group of men preparing to ride out. Violet watched him go, her heart pounding with a fear that surprised her with its intensity. Hours passed. The women and children remained at the ranch house, the mood tense as they waited for news. Shortly after midnight, riders began returning, their faces grim. Violet scanned each group for Gabriel, her worry growing when she didn't see him. Finally, Sheriff Mills rode in, supporting a slumped figure on his horse. Violet's heart stopped when she recognized Gabriel's hat. She pushed through the crowd as they lifted him down. Blood stained his shirt from a wound in his shoulder, and his face was pale beneath the dirt and smoke. "Gabriel!" The use of his first name came naturally in her fear. She reached his side as they laid him on a makeshift bed in the ranch house. His eyes opened at her voice, focusing on her face with effort. "Violet," he murmured, "you're safe." "I'm fine," she assured him, taking his hand, "but you're hurt." Sheriff Mills explained as the ranch foreman's wife began cleaning Gabriel's wound. "Took a bullet meant for me. We caught 2 of the rustlers, but their leader got away after shooting Alderman. Did you recognize him?" Violet asked. The sheriff exchanged a glance with the ranch foreman. It was Silas Harker. The name hit Violet like a physical blow. "Harker. But he's your late husband's business partner," Mills finished grimly. "Appears he's been using information from your store's accounts to target ranches for months," understanding dawned. "That's why someone tried to break into my house." Harker needed the ledgers. Gabriel's hand tightened around hers. "Makes sense now," he said weakly. "He couldn't risk you discovering discrepancies in the accounts." The doctor arrived and shooed everyone away to tend to Gabriel's wound. Violet paced outside, her mind racing. Silas Harker had been Thomas's friend and business partner in the early days of the mercantile. After a falling out 3 years ago, he'd left town, supposedly to try his luck in the silver mines. When the doctor emerged, his expression was cautiously optimistic. "Bullet went clean through. He's lost blood, but with rest and care he should recover fully. I want to take him to my home," Violet said immediately. "I can nurse him there." The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Kane, that might not be proper, propriety be damned," she interrupted, surprising even herself with her vehemence. "That man took a bullet while trying to protect this town. I'll not have him recovering in some drafty hotel room." Her tone brooked no argument. Within the hour, Gabriel was installed in Violet's spare bedroom, pale but conscious. Sheriff Mills posted a deputy outside the house in case Harker decided to return. Alone with Gabriel at last, Violet sat beside his bed, dabbing his forehead with a cool cloth. "You shouldn't have been so reckless," she scolded gently. A weak smile touched his lips. "Occupational hazard." "Well, I don't approve," her voice caught. "I've buried one man I cared about. I'm not eager to repeat the experience." Gabriel's eyes widened at her admission. He reached for her hand, wincing at the movement. "Violet," he said softly, using her given name for the first time with her permission. "I'm not going anywhere, see that you don't." She blinked back unexpected tears. "I've grown rather accustomed to having you around." Over the next week, Gabriel recovered slowly under Violet's care. Sheriff Mills and his deputies combed the countryside for Silas Harker, but the rustler had vanished, presumably fleeing the territory. With Gabriel confined to bed, Violet split her time between the store and nursing him. Their conversations grew deeper, more personal. She told him about meeting Thomas at a church social in Denver, about their dreams of building a life on the frontier. He spoke of his years with the Rangers, the loneliness after his wife's death, his aimless wandering since then. "I wasn't even supposed to be on that train," he confessed one evening as she changed his bandage. "Was headed to Wyoming for a job, changed my mind at the last minute." Violet's hands stilled. Why, he looked at her, his eyes steady, couldn't say exactly. "Just felt pulled to take that southern route instead. Now I'm thinking maybe there was a reason." The implication hung in the air between them, neither ready to put it into words. By the following Sunday, Gabriel was strong enough to sit on the porch. Violet brought him coffee, settling into the chair beside him. The October morning was crisp, the trees along the street aflame with autumn colors. "Sheriff wired me this morning," Gabriel said. "They caught Harker trying to cross into New Mexico. He's being brought back to stand trial." Relief washed over Violet. "Good, I still can't believe he betrayed Thomas's trust like that. Some men can't see past their own greed." Gabriel set down his cup. "Which brings me to something I've been meaning to discuss with you." Violet's heart quickened at his serious tone. "Oh." "The Cattlemen's Association has offered me a permanent position, security consultant for the ranches in the territory." He paused. "It would mean settling in the area." "I see," Violet said carefully, afraid to hope. "And is that something you're considering?" Gabriel turned to face her fully. "Depends on whether there's a reason for me to stay." The moment stretched between them, fraught with possibility. Violet thought of the 6 months of emptiness before Gabriel stepped off that train, of the gradual awakening she'd experienced in his presence. "I think," she said slowly, "that Cottonwood Springs could benefit from having someone with your skills around permanently." A smile tugged at his lips. "Is that the only reason?" Gathering her courage, Violet reached for his hand. "No," she admitted softly, "it's not." Gabriel's fingers intertwined with hers. "I never expected to find someone again," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "After Julia died, I thought that part of my life was over. I felt the same way about Thomas." Violet squeezed his hand. "But perhaps life out here does make one promise after all." "What's that?" he asked. "That even after the hardest winter, spring always returns." Gabriel lifted their joined hands, pressing a gentle kiss to her fingers. "I'd like to court you properly, Violet Kane, if you'll allow it." Joy, an emotion she'd thought lost to her forever, bloomed in Violet's chest. "I think I'd like that very much, Gabriel Alderman." As the sun climbed higher in the autumn sky, they sat together on the porch, hands still intertwined, contemplating a future neither had imagined possible just 1 month before. And in the distance, the whistle of the morning train reminded them both of how a chance meeting on a station platform had changed everything. By the following spring, the mercantile sign had been repainted to read Alderman and Kane General Store. Violet still managed the business, but now with Gabriel's help when he wasn't working with the ranchers. Their wedding, a simple ceremony in the town's small church, had been the social event of the winter, attended by nearly everyone in Cottonwood Springs. Standing behind the counter on a bright April morning, Violet watched through the window as Gabriel loaded supplies into a wagon. The sun caught the gold of his wedding band as he worked, and a familiar warmth filled her heart. Grief had taught her the fragility of life, but Gabriel had reminded her of its possibilities. When he glanced up and caught her watching, his smile lit his entire face. Violet smiled back, grateful for the day she'd sat alone at the train station, and for the man who'd stepped off the last car and changed her life forever.